welcome to episode 380 of Retro Encounter, comrades. RPG fans, mostly weekly, currently bi-weekly podcast about many topics, usually of the retro variety. And we are here today to talk about a game that is not particularly retro, but it is driven by lots of retro ideas, even like into tabletop ideas, and that is Disco Elysium. That very strange, I mean very strange, 2019 RPG with no combat, but you can definitely take damage, and I have a lot. So before we start talking about this very odd game, I want to go ahead and introduce our panel, starting with you, Hilary.
All right. Hello. I'm eager to find out how many of us are comrades at this point in the game. And I know we said we were going to say our favorite stats from the game, so there's some really interesting stats that you can play with and determine many different actions of Disco Elysium. And my two favorites, I'm going to go with Volition, because I like having high morale. I like Volition taking care of me.
My morale gets damaged a lot, so it's good for me to have a high Volition.
Yep. And conceptualization is my other, because conceptualization is kind of like the taste artsy stat, and I love their commentary a lot.
Yeah, I just learned that skill where I'm like an art historian or art lover
cop
or something. Yeah, that's art cop.
You police people's taste.
And Ben.
Yeah, so my favorite two stats would be Inland Empire.
Great one.
Because you get some really interesting and mind-bending internal monologues out of that. And then Empathy. My area is very much a sorry cop. So I probably apologized about, 50 times in my playthrough so far.
I think I just got that achievement about 3 hours ago. So yeah. I feel like Empathy is maybe like the most useful stat, at least for me so far too.
One of them for sure.
And I had 0 empathy to start because I was like an intellect Harry, and then I'm like, okay, I need to build my empathy, so that's where I've been pulling all my points. Anyway, Aleks.
Yeah, hi. Really love this game and looking forward to talking about it. My two favorite stats, I mean, probably one of them would be Inland Empire, for the same reasons Ben mentioned. Just like really interesting that stat is just like getting too deep into your head and leading to some interesting thought processes. Really fan of that one. But I will go with Shivers for one.
Yeah.
Just because I just like love whenever it ends up like just randomly appearing as I'm exploring the world. It ends up having this like just really like poetic almost language in terms of like describing the physical environment around you. It seems to like almost tune into like your memories as well, as destroyed as they are in this game.
Yeah.
Sometimes it even gives you like kind of like premonitions of what you might end up doing in the future.
Yep.
It's just like this fascinating way of like kind of feeling and understanding the world physically. And I just like love the way it's written in general. And the other one I'll just give a shout out to is electrochemistry, because I'm going full into the booze and drugs this run, and I'm cranking that stat up.
Yeah, electrochemistry is my answer anyway, because I don't know who my Harry is except for like Chaos Cop, where he just tries to annoy everyone around him. The very first achievement I got in this game was like, you hit an all-time low with Kim, and I'm like, it happened like 2 hours in.
That's really hard.
That's impressive.
That's the kind of cop I'm playing, and I'm either on drugs or drunk or both at every moment that I am awake in this game, because I think it's funny. Like basically my whole goal of this game is to amuse myself so far, and it's working. And electrochemistry is the one that I feel like always gives me like the response. It's always just like someone will say something about drugs and he's like, oh, maybe they have speed. Maybe they know where speed is. I'm sharing bottles of speed with 8-year-olds. I'm a great role model. Let me say that. So to kind of back up a little bit before we kind of dig in, Disco Elysium, it is an isometric-ish PC game that is, sort of inspired by lots of different things, Dungeons and Dragons, certainly, other isometric RPGs. and it is really strange in the way that it's presented in a lot of ways. So it takes place in this fictional world that I think is very much inspired by 1980s Poland, where you wake up and you're a police officer in an area called Ravishell. Did I say that correctly?
Rivishol.
Revachol, yeah.
Revachol. Yeah, you guys, everybody's gonna have to correct me on my pronunciation literally every single time I talk today. So I appreciate that. And you're there to, it turns out, investigate a murder. And sort of before we get into the story stuff, in terms of like the way the game works, you never in combat. You are constantly having conversations with people, and your ability to do certain things like physically or even you know uh have take certain dialogue trees down certain routes is driven by stats, and so those stats we were talking about earlier, you have like sort of four subcategories like psyche, and physique, and then you have different categories within them, like electrochemistry basically is like how in tune are you with, I don't know, drugs and alcohol, and it's basically the sex, drugs, and rock and roll one, so I like it. And so and an entire game is sort of driven by that. And there are a million other things I could talk about and they'll come up, but I wanted to make sure everybody had sort of a good baseline. So let's talk about the opening, which I think is very striking, of Disco Elysium.
Mhm.
When I first turned it on, I played for the first 20 minutes and I was like, oh my goodness. The quality of the writing was just like remarkable. The quality of the voice acting. I'm assuming we're all playing the Final Cut version.
Mhm.
Yep.
Can't imagine this game without the voice acting. It's so
That was so good.
Especially
yeah,
the narrator.
Yeah, I love the
I
narrator.
agree with you.
Love
He's
him.
apparently like a jazz musician or something. I was just reading about that earlier.
So
Which
good.
is very cool. But yeah, so what are your sort of opening impressions of the opening hour and a half of this game? Things you liked, things that struck you?
Yeah, one thing I think is interesting about the opening is that you can die very quickly, and I
Oh
think
yeah.
that people going into this game, they know, oh, there's no combat. So I think a lot of people, I know I did this, is like make a Harry that has like no physical stats, and then you go to like turn the light on in your hotel room and you just immediately die.
You have a heart attack.
So I know that happened to me on my first playthrough, because you wake up as a cop who is having a horrible hangover and you've drunk yourself into a state of amnesia and you don't remember who you are or what you're supposed to be doing. And it's a crazy opening. I mean, I can't think of any game that really opens like that, with that much, kind of that you can kind of get into anything and anything can kind of happen to you at that point. So
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's taken her share of neurobio and things like that, I love how it goes through the layers of the brain as you're waking
Mhm.
up. That's really cool. And it establishes really well this concept throughout the game that your character is going to have different facets of his brain kind of talking to each other like throughout the entire game. And it's all really well written, which is lovely.
Yeah, and like just from the opening, like I think you're chatting with your limbic system
I
to
think
start.
I think it's your reptilian.
Reptilian brain, yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
and
yeah.
then your limbic system.
I
Kicks
love the
in.
voice actor for Reptilian Brain
Yeah.
too.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, right from that opening, you're kind of getting
Yeah.
a sense that this game is it's trying to like almost simulate the way that our minds work and that our
Mhm.
minds and our
Mhm.
bodies work together, and like that's totally replicated in like the skill set breakdown that the game offers you. Like,
Yeah, it's
bas-
remarkable.
yeah, it's like basically like there's the two kind of mental categories of stats, so that's intellect and psyche, and that all contains like the different skills like logic, rhetoric, empathy, volition that kind of relate to your mental well-being, and then you have the physique and motorics
Yes.
categories, which are how you relate to the physical reality around you. So it's basically your endurance, your electrochemistry, shivers, perception,
Your
hand-eye coordination.
Yep.
So
And perception, always useful.
for sure. And yeah, it's just interesting the way that this game broke down the way we as humans work just through the skill system. It's one of the most
Mhm.
fascinating
Mhm.
parts of the game. It's like you can look at these stats and like start thinking about like, oh, I wonder, like, what numerical scores would I assign myself with these numbers? And it's an interesting little reflective thought exercise that and just goes to show how much thought went into generating this skill system in general.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think even like when you first wake up in that hotel room and you don't have any idea where you are and you don't know sort of like you can pick like one of three sort of selections of stats, or you can be like a thinker, where you're like really good at being intelligent, but you're not as good at that. And as I'm picking that, I'm like, I don't really know what stats are going to be most important. But one of the things that I think is fascinating about this game, and you talking about that, is that we talked a little bit about those dice rolls, but like the fact that failure of failing the dice rolls, because like basically the idea is like you'll get like dialogue options or whatever, and you'll get like a percentage that you will pass a certain check. So one of the first things you do is you look in the mirror, probably, at least if you're like me. And you see like this weird face, and you're like, oh, what are you gonna do with it? And you have like these checks where you can, or these dialogue options where you can choose to like try to make your face look different or whatever.
Wipe the smarmy disco expression
Right.
off your face.
Yeah. And I love that failure is so baked into the way that the game is created. Like a failure is actually oftentimes significantly more entertaining than anything else. Like,
or it can lead to unexpected results.
Yeah. Yeah, like I got lucky on this, but like I was shooting a body down because I'm a cop. I guess that's the kind of cop I am. And my partner had tried to do the same thing, and apparently if you fail that, you shoot a hole through the body.
That's what I did this
like,
time.
That's really fascinating. And so like the way that like you're not ever really trying to win necessarily, you're just trying to kind of explore, and as you fail things, it creates sort of different avenues you have to go down.
Yeah. And I hope you don't mind me jumping in
ahead.
for just a second, but along with that, just before I forget, want to say, and that's kind of built into the stats too. Like you can kind of customize as well, and in every stat description, it basically tells you that there are consequences for having it too low, but also consequences for having it too high, like encyclopedia interrupting you with useless information.
Yeah, I have a really high encyclopedia stat, and it's incredibly annoying.
I love the encyclopedia. I think it's super useful because you learn like all this lore that you wouldn't learn if you didn't have the
That's
stat
true.
pretty high.
It
but
is
I
great
don't
for a
learn
first
it.
playthrough.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the things that's sort of about this world. It's like the amnesia is sort of meant to reflect who we are as, this person who's entering into this space, right? And you get placed in Ravishal, and there's a murder there that we think probably had something to do with a union that is striking in town against Wild Pines, I think is the name of the company.
Correct. The logistics company. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, well, I think it's interesting you start as an amnesiac, and that's useful for you as the player coming into this world in a new way. But Harry is very much his own character, so he's a little bit of a blank slate, but he also has this whole past that you kind of uncover and elements about him, and so it does a really interesting juxtaposition of him as the blank slate and you coming in new, and also like him as a character, as a fully defined character in that world, and then his pre-existing relationships and how they relate back to
Absolutely. And I love what like a gradual learning process it is to like discover who he is, because like I mean the amnesiac protagonist is like, I feel, such a trope in video games, but like here it's just like, one, it's like hilarious that like he lost his memory just from like a massive drug and alcohol induced bender, but also it just becomes this like great opportunity to allow the player to kind of role play the kind of character they want to be, but at the same time the game's trying to tell the specific story and develop a character, a protagonist at the same time. So it's like, you get to come in with building your character, you get to come in with like kind of the blank slate that the amnesia allows you, but then as you're playing the game, you start slowly discovering a different aspect of Harry's past that you can then interact with who he's been becoming through your interactions as the player, and which leads you to kind of reflect a bit on like, oh, how does this new bit of information and character development I'm getting, how does that does that change the kind of character I want to play? Like it ends up being just an extra layer to like kind of the really unique and open role playing experience that this game provides.
It is.
Mhm.
It's a fascinating narrative layer because on the one hand, it is kind of like blank slate, new beginning, but then you learn all these pieces about his existing, personality and relationships and all that stuff, and it's almost like you're kind of controlling his new beginning, and you can choose how to respond or react to that information. You can have him choose to do things differently, or choose to make some of the same mistakes, or
Mhm.
you kind of control where he goes from here, and that's
Mhm.
really a fun position to be in as the player.
Yeah, and the mechanics really allow for that too, because even though you make some of those decisions at the beginning of the game regarding, your stats and attributes and everything, you gain experience through pretty much everything that you do and every conversation you have, and you'll get so many skill points that your Harry can end up being very different towards the end of the game than the one that you started with. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of room for you to change and evolve Harry based on your interactions with people and your experiences with other people, and you're kind of simulating like that character growth that you would get in a typical story through the mechanics of the game, as well as the information you're learning and the interactions you have with other characters. It's very
Yeah, I mean,
interesting.
like that's a great way to put it, and like that's kind of what happened in my first playthrough. Obviously, this one I'm still in the middle of, but I started as a pretty broken kind of sorry cop Harry in my first playthrough, and was still like doing same drugs, making like a lot of the same mistakes. But then I started like sobering up during the playthrough as I was discovering new bits of information, and that's kind of just how my role playing journey took me, and I ended up becoming like a super competent cop by the end of it, and it was such a rewarding character arc to go through as a player, and then just to see like replicated on the screen as well. But yeah, this time around I'm going superstar cop. I'm just like leaning into the madness of it all.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because I know that there are some different endings to this game. But the idea that you can sort of stumble your way through it and you could also competent your way through it, I think is a really interesting way of allowing you to do that. And like for me, like my whole response is like, I want to annoy everyone around me, including like my partner who's watching me play, and just say like the craziest things every single time I interact with people. But it allows you can sort of see how people wouldn't know how to respond to someone who is this insane. And so still kind of getting to some of that. And yeah, like I think that you're right, because like as I was playing, and this is where I was going earlier, like I have that encyclopedia stat because I chose thinker. But man, like there is so much information about this world and in this world, like I cannot retain even 20% of it. Like in terms, like I know we're in an archipelago, I know that this was sort of like a war torn area,
Mhm.
and it hasn't recovered from that. And you have like all these competing interests, including like people from different nations, and there's like this enormous amount of racism. And communism sort of fell, but you sort of have like this undercurrent of communism in the game. And so like it presents so much information that I find that very overwhelming. But when I started like being able to put like points into stats, I was more interested in the things that are going to happen with empathy or with electrochemistry or with shiver, as someone was talking about earlier. And so it allows you to sort of kind of find your way through it in a really interesting way, I think. But it doesn't have to happen in any order, because like the first thing you're supposed to do is investigate the body. And come like 1 a.m. on my first day, I hadn't investigated the body yet. I had roundhouse kicked a racist on a bridge. I had been bribed by a union boss, talked to a negotiator, refused to talk to the scabs, but I had not investigated the body yet. And it just gives you so much freedom in the order and the ways in which you experience the world that I think
Hmm.
it's fascinating too.
Yeah, and to kind of like build off that, like it's not like complete freedom in a way, because you do end up getting like kind of pigeonholed based on what your stat strengths are. So like for example, if you have a good like kind of physical skill set, then you might be able to take care of the racist measurehead that you mentioned and give him a good old roundhouse kick. get to progress where you need to in the game. But
I just got lucky. I had 17% to
yeah,
clear
or
it, and
you
I
just
got
get
it.
lucky. I once got a 3% roll success. That was one of the most hype video game experiences of my life. But yeah, just continuing on. But like, say you don't have high enough like physical stats to do that, but you might have high like motorics, which allows you to kind of circumvent the whole like main entrance to the harbor
Yep.
and jump off a roof to get to where you need to be. So you end up getting these specific interactions that either you get by through the sheer luck of the roll, or you're more likely to successfully interact with due to your stats. And that kind of like applies also to like the way that the game works as role playing, because as much as you might be trying to like role play a specific character, that is also going to be influenced by which stats you have a high number in, because those like internal voices that you have, like be it empathy, be it shivers or whatever, they will like just insert themselves in the middle of conversations with like real NPCs, and that ends up becoming this whole interaction between an internal dialogue in Harry's head and the external dialogue he's having with different characters. And as they're inserting themselves, they're trying to like influence you like all the time. And a good example for this one is Half-Light. So I have pretty high like physique this time around, and I get like Half-Light coming in, and Half-Light is just a vicious, animalistic, violent stat that just inserts itself and wants to make suggestions that lead you to react like violently to the world around you. And yeah, because you have that higher of a stat, it ends up creating that kind of more of a role-playing affordance for yourself that you can take or leave, but that you're probably going to be more influenced to take, because that voice is just constantly inserting itself
Yeah.
as you're trying to interact with the world.
And I think that what makes it interesting is that's sort of like the way we experience the world in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we all have like versions of ourselves we want to be, and who we want to be to other people, and we have versions of ourselves who we are based on all kinds of things, um, and sort of navigating like your natural impulses with the impulses that you wish you had. I think is an interesting sort of part of being human, and I think this game uh, replicates that notion really in a really interesting way. And also, like me talking about things that I don't really understand sometimes, just to sort of fit in, which Harry definitely does a lot. I think is really cool way of the way you describing it sort of made me think of that. So that's really cool. I think.
Yeah. I mean, on that first day, your choices with Harry, a lot of them are either admit that you have no idea what's going on or pretend like you do.
Or to just like apologize all the time and be like genuinely inquisitive.
Yeah.
Which kind of I mean, another thing we can kind of get into is just Kim as like your main companion in
Yeah.
general, because I
We've
think
gone through 25 minutes of this podcast. We haven't talked about Kim yet.
I
That's
know.
a failure on my part as a host.
Yeah, so Kim is just like, he also ends up being this really important part to how role playing in the game works, because he's just the most straight edge, no nonsense cop you can ask for, and he's a very good cop, and he's like a very moralistic person. Um, but you can be like trying to play like a complete degenerate, deranged cop like I am this time, and Kim is gonna be there to, one, like just watch you and enjoy the antics on one hand, or be concerned, but also to make sure you stay kind of on track with the main narrative. So he
Yep.
kind of becomes this really essential device to like even making this game work as a story, rather than just like an insanity simulator. Because like he's always there to like at the end of the first day you have to do like a debrief with him, and that ends up being like this really important way of like taking stock of what needs to be done, and
Mhm.
what you did manage to do so far.
Yeah.
And so yeah, just having Kim there, it really makes the story work, and he's just a great character in general, which we
Yes.
can talk about.
Yeah, he really enforces, I think, one of the themes of the game, which is like human connection. And I think it's so common for games to have you be like this singular hero or person who can does all these amazing things on their own. And Disco Elysium is very much about the humbleness and mediocrity of people. And but how there's beauty in that, and how we need each other to get anything done, and to have Kim there all the time, like having your back, and him also having his own deficiencies that your Harry can sometimes, help with, or figure something out for him that he otherwise wouldn't be able to do due to his own
Yeah, that he
personality.
would have missed.
hmm I just think it's just so powerful because you have that constant interaction and relationship you develop with him. And you see that echoed throughout the rest of the game. But that is just so important. He always feels like a person. He never feels like a tutorial or like um, you know,
A
the
mechanic
kind of
of the game to keep you on track.
yes. He's so integral to that experience, and I think it's so telling that everybody comes away loving him so much. So
And he is one of the main things about day one of the game, because you stumble around the hostel where you're staying, have a bunch of conversations with people who are either concerned because you don't remember who you are, or mad at you because of things you've done. And he's kind of like this nice grounding presence. It's like, okay, let's address things one by one, let's go around, let's make some progress on the investigation.
yeah, he has almost like infinite patience.
Oh, he definitely does in my playthrough. I mean, he's definitely like not approving of me, but yeah, I mean, I think that you guys all capture Kim really well. I think this game wouldn't work without that grounding force
Nope.
because Harry wouldn't get anything done. At least my Harry wouldn't. And yeah, I mean, like, I think that even the ways in which he will sort of gently nudge you during conversations, he's like, hey, maybe we don't need to hear about cryptids again. I'm
Yes,
like,
we do.
hey,
Yes, we do.
this is the kind of nonsense. Like, reading the cryptid descriptions is like reading every other piece of lore in this game to me, which is like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, I mean, I think that he's such a critical part, and I tried to leave the hostel without him, and he's like, "What are you doing?"
You
Yeah.
tried to leave without him.
Yeah, I did, because that would be funny.
But there are things you can
"Excuse
only
me."
do without Kim around.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
That's what
too.
I've heard. I don't know how
Mhm.
to get Kim to go away yet.
It's just at a certain time at night, so he'll go to bed like after
Oh.
2100 hours, and
Yep.
then you can leave your room at that point, and that's how you can get around without him if you need to do something where you don't want his disapproving gaze lingering
You
over
can do
you.
all the drugs you want.
I mean, I just do him in front of him, and he's like, "Well, okay."
Actually,
Jeez.
one of my
Um,
favorite experiences with Kim during this playthrough has been I forgot the name of the drug, but it's the one you get from the pawn shop guy. And I
Oh,
oh
just
like the
yeah,
nuclear sickness one or
yeah,
whatever.
the
yeah.
Yeah,
radiation sickness
yeah.
treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got it from the shop. I stepped outside and slurped it up immediately, and then is like a mix of electrochemistry and empathy work together to be like, you should tell Kim, you should share this like exciting experience with him. And I did, and he's just like, I'm very happy for you.
Oh jeez.
And then like all my other kind of stats just like ended up firing like one after the other, just being like, yeah, this is like the excitement of drugs. He's happy for you. Look at how fun this is. It was a great one.
Oh dear.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
actually, bringing up the pawn shop guy, that makes me think of just like the one interesting thing about this game is that the all of the side characters like have so much depth to them.
yep.
Hmm.
So like the pawn shop guy, just as an example, he he's just a guy who runs a pawn shop, and you can buy items from him that you might need for the game or whatever. But if you talk to him, you can find out that in the past, that after Revshol was abandoned by government forces in the aftermath of the war, that people kind of banded together in the slum to try to create a nuclear reactor to generate a clean energy source for everybody, because they didn't have any utilities for everybody to live on. And because they lacked the knowledge and the institutional supports, the reactor failed and created like a massive nuclear disaster in the middle of this city. And so he was part of the cleanup crew and the rescue crew for that disaster. And so the reason why he takes the drug is because of his experiences.
Yeah, his
You know,
exposure to radiation.
yeah, his radiation exposure, both that and the trauma of
Yep.
the result of that and the damage that he saw to people and everything. And I mean, it's like a really intense, you know, backstory and haunting and beautiful backstory for a character to have. And he's just like a random shopkeeper. Like you don't really
He's a
even have to
shopkeeper, yeah.
interact with him. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things early on with the game for me at least was like and I think this is on purpose. Besides Kim, like I was like, who am I supposed to like in this world? I couldn't really get a feel for it. I think it's they're trying to sort of play with that, like the union boss, very unlikable, but also the person on the other side is also very unlikable. Because she just spouts nonsense constantly, and I have conversations with her about reality where what's her name again?
Joyce.
Oh,
Joyce.
Joyce. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was the first moment where I was like, all right, I can sort of see like where they're going to go. I think that backstory is really beautiful, to getting to that idea about community that you were talking about earlier, Ben. And I think Kuno, who when you first meet him is a child who's throwing rocks at the body that
And
you are there to investigate.
and
And
I'm sorry, and he interrupts your field autopsy because Kim says his rocks were thrown at low velocity, and he's like, "No, maximum velocity."
Yeah, and you can put
To
in
get-
your notes that it's like high velocity.
Yeah. So this is the type of kid we're dealing with.
Yeah, and is maybe the filthiest mouth of a character I've ever met in a video game, or maybe anywhere, and is so fueled by rage. But then, if you get to know Kuno better, you realize just how much of a disaster his home life is, with his
Mhm.
father in particular. And the way he tells it is not like in a way that like it's trying to generate sympathy. He's just talking about how he's not going to care about anything because his dad never cares about anything, and everything sucks. So I'm going to go underground and I'm going to be awesome. And maybe it's like the teacher in me, but like I just see it as like this super tragic way of showing how this world is failing so many of the people who live there, and it's failing this child in particular. But yeah, I mean, I think when you get to those checks, where you're able to kind of get past the barrier of these characters, I'm like, and see the depth. I think it is. I don't really want to say that story is beautiful, but like I think it gets to the power of the writing in this game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, the characters just feel like fully featured people. They don't just serve like a gameplay or singular narrative purpose. They all tend to have like some kind of history or past that influences their current personality and behavior in a way that's understandable and very similar to people that you might have encountered in real life. And it just lends all of the characters this really feeling of believability and realisticness, even when their antics or what's going on might be kind of fantastical or absurd.
Yeah, and like depending on what your stat strengths are, like you might not be able to discover the full backstory of
Mhm.
certain characters on like a single playthrough, as I'm kind of realizing on the second playthrough. Which is also interesting because I mean I think so much of what makes this game interesting is the potential for replayability, and seeing how like having different stat strengths will influence the ways that conversations go differently in terms of like the internal dialogues Harry is having in his head, in terms of like the different checks you're more likely to pass, which unlock more elements of dialogue, and so a lot of um, yeah, a lot of the game is kind of like hidden behind multiple playthroughs, which
Hmm.
is great for a role playing perspective. Because I mean, I feel like nowadays, especially, a lot of RPGs, like Western RPGs, that offer these kinds of more choice based conversation trees, will kind of have it that you can end up doing anything, everything with any character that you build. That like you're able to like have the same interactions with people and with the world around you, but the fact that this game makes it a lot more specific to the particular character you're playing, it just like adds a lot more meaning to the experience of role playing, which is I think why a lot of people point out that like this game's drawing so much on like tabletop RPG kind of mechanics that allow for that more open-ended character building and more improvisational kind of interactions.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of room for true role playing in this game, which is just something that you don't really see, I feel like, a lot in the genre, in the way that um, you can really embody like a particular personality or type of person that you can in this game.
Right, and you sit with the consequences of that.
Hmm. Yeah, the game is not afraid to change drastically or lock you out of things
Uh-uh.
or make things massively different based on
I,
your choices, and
I,
that's really powerful, I think. Yeah.
this is a little ahead of where we're talking because we're kind of talking to the end of day 2. But I broke my pry bar on like the beginning of the 3rd day trying to break into a church. I'm like, really?
I
How am I
didn't
going to
even
get
know
my
you could
pry
do
bar
that.
back? Yeah, yeah. If you go there before you talk to the musicians who want to use it, um, you can use your pry bar to try to get in. It doesn't actually get you in, but it will break even after you pass the check. Um, so at least it did on my playthrough. So I was like, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do? But yeah, I like that it makes you sit with the consequences, but the consequences are never like you're not going to be able to do this thing. Although I did learn to save with some regularity
Mm-hmm.
because I know
Yes.
I died like probably 4 times in the first hour and a half of this game. And the last time I died and then had to do a bunch of dialogue again
Oof.
was when I was going to talk to the union boss and he made me sit
Oh,
in that
Mm.
chair.
Oh,
go.
when the chair killed you, yeah.
And it was so
Uncomfortable chair.
uncomfortable that I actually died. When apparently he's so comfortable that like he never gets out of his
Yeah.
office.
Yeah,
It's
what the
literally a
heck?
cargo thing that they move him in if he ever
Mhm.
needs to go somewhere else,
Yeah.
which is certainly a perspective on union bosses. It doesn't seem very positive.
Yeah, well, the game is very interesting in that way because I think one thing we haven't really talked about, but that is a big integral part of the game, is the political
Mm-hmm.
background that you can choose for your character, and that kind of comes through dialogue options that you choose when you're interacting with people. There will be different dialogue options that correspond to a particular political ideology, and I've seen a lot of of commentary online and stuff about this game, and a lot of people from a lot of different political backgrounds all find something of themselves or to like in this game. And I personally think that the developers of the game and the game itself has a very particular political bent to it. And we can get in that if we want to, but it does allow you that freedom to be a centrist or a neoliberal or a communist or a fascist. And I think that's a really interesting thing for a game to wade into because most games shy away from
Right.
real world politics so much. So,
And you can sort of do it as like a reaction to what you're discovering in the
Mhm.
world around you, since you're kind of this blank slate. And it's personally one thing I find really, really interesting about it is that it all sort of builds up. Like you will get, points towards one of those ideologies in your dialogues, and then if you get enough points in one, some of your stats will pop up and say,
Mhm.
"Hey, I think it's your rhetoric." It's like, "Hey, comrade,
Mhm.
how about
Yeah.
communism?"
Well, we haven't even talked about the thought cabinet a ton, I don't
Yep.
think.
We haven't even touched on it yet.
Nope.
Yeah, which so this is what you're kind of getting at,
Hmm.
Hilary, is when you make different dialogue choices, sometimes you'll get like a little, one of your attribute voices will come up and say, something like, oh, you're kind of going down this line or whatever. And then you'll get an option to so you can unlock these spots in the thought cabinet, and then you can hang on to thoughts in there if you spend skill points to unlock them. So you can get thoughts like, I forget what they have the founder of communism in this university is called like Krasmazov, I think, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I ran
So
into his bust in some apartment building
oh
recently. That's what I know. So yeah.
yeah, and so you can take on like his economic theory, or you can take on so most players will interact with Measurehead, the Simonese supremacist, early on because he's guarding the Union docks, and you can talk to him and then take on his race theory.
That is one way to get past him early on in the game.
Yes, yes. So you can take on all of these thoughts or ideologies. You can take on belief in the cryptids, like we were mentioning
Yep.
earlier. You can take on all kinds of different, personality or ideology thoughts. And that also can interact with, it may lower a certain stat or raise a certain stat, but then it has other dialogue options and
Yeah.
consequences to it.
It's really neat the way it's built because there's like this process of internalizing the thought, and each one kind of has a different duration, and you get stat modifications while you're processing the thought,
Mhm.
and then that might not necessarily be the same as when you've finished processing the thought.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You
they're
kind of
usually
get like,
negative when you're processing, and then you might have some negative, but you at least have something positive by the end, right?
Yep.
Mhm.
Usually.
Those thoughts do come with like both like a positive and a negative. Like I think if you do subscribe to like the Masovian socioeconomics, so like Marxism,
Mhm.
um, you get if you choose left-wing dialogue options, they give you more XP, which will just allow you to like level up more.
Mhm.
But you also just get straight up -1 to visual calculus and -1 to authority. I guess the logic
Uh-huh.
there being that because communism was such a failed experiment in this world, as it was in Europe during the Cold War, that you just have lost that kind of authoritative power over
Well,
the ideas.
I think it's actually because communism is an anti-hierarchical ideology, and so if you lose authority because you're not willing to enforce the
A
hierarchy,
hierarchy.
yeah,
I could
And then you're a cop, right? So
right,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, the
and
way it even like describes it as like -1 authority, downtrodden in the communist. So like
ah
all of these
Mhm.
different like thought cabinet ones, like it gives you like a lot of like flavor text to like
yep.
Mhm.
how that might influence the way that your character like is now based on like the different stat modifiers, and also how to role play going forward based on having internalized that thought.
And they can come up in some of the most like unexpected places. Like I hope you all don't mind me telling a little story, but I was investigating the bookshop, which is another location that you'll find right around your crime scene. Um, and there's a patron outside, and for some reason you keep getting these dialogue options insisting that she's missing something.
It's so
Even
funny. And then
even
I hugged her for a long time too.
yeah. So you can just like keep pestering her, and he's, well, maybe your husband's missing. No, he's fine. He's at home. Well, maybe your cockatoo is missing. And she'll finally like have enough with you, and she'll be like, I think you're a cockatoo. And all of a sudden, Harry's going like, what does this mean? I need to find my heraldic bird, which was just really entertaining. So of course she says there's a book about cockatoos in the bookshop if if Harry wants to understand what she means. So of course I immediately went in and stole it in front of Kim because I didn't have any money. That
And then you get to decide what kind of cockatoo
yeah,
you are.
you
I
know,
think I called myself the sorry cockatoo, I think.
I think I was the funerary
Yeah.
cockatoo.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's interesting too, talking about, and I think probably the politics of the game, I think probably we could talk more about in the second half when we get a little bit
Okay.
more of a feel for where it goes. But I think, as I'm playing the game, like, I sort of, at least as a person who knows stuff about the game, like, I'm aware that, like, the writers here are pretty left leaning, right?
Hmm.
Yes, they're communists. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so I'm like, I'm gonna choose the communist options because that feels canon to me.
Mhm.
And then like sometimes as I'm having conversations, I'm like, I think I want the centrist response. And then like as a person who considers himself to be very left leaning, I'm like, am I maybe not as left leaning as I thought I was? And so it's actually making me like interrogate myself and really think about like what would my response to these situations be.
I
Um,
had the exact same thing happen to me in my first playthrough.
yeah.
Which yeah, it's really like powerful how much this game can kind of prompt almost like a self-reflective attitude for the player based on like how it frames like all these different like ideological forces all kind of coming together in this one like downtrodden world. But also just regarding the way that it keeps track of your um like different political modifiers, or rather like political choices. So like it's yeah, there's communism, fascism, ultra liberalism, and moralism.
Mhm.
And importantly, I think this isn't something that you just choose at the beginning of the game for yourself, nor is it something that you're even aware is being counted the first time you play, because you actually don't get to see how many choices you've made regarding each of these four different political
Nope.
ideologies until you find your ledger
Hmm.
um, in the trash near the dead body.
Yep.
Um, and
Yet
That's
another.
such a good sequence too. We'll talk more about it in a second. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
yeah, and so yeah, so you until you find your ledger, you're not even aware that this is a thing that the game is keeping track of. So you might just be, making decisions kind of willy-nilly based on your role playing, and then you're suddenly like, oh wait, this game is like very politically minded and wants me to be politically minded as the player as I'm playing and making my different interactions with the game. And I think that's just such a neat trick that it's just not like you're looking through your dialogue tree and it's like in square brackets behind an option, it's like communist option, or something like that, as a lot of Western RPGs will often do. But it kind of lulls you into just like kind of like a natural sense of role playing, and then introduces these different stats, including like the kind of cop you're becoming, which I
Kappa
think
type.
your kappa type, yeah, which I think includes superstar cop, boring cop, sorry cop, and
Apocalypse
apocalypse
Cop.
cop, which is a great one. But yeah, it's great how that's kind of introduced a bit into the game rather than just kind of thrown at you from the front. I think that's a really neat role playing trick.
We didn't talk too much about the cabinet of thoughts or whatever it's called, but like the one that I know I will never get rid of is Hobo Cop, because I need Hobo Cop.
Yeah, interestingly, with my stat distribution, I didn't get offered Hobocop this time around, so I'm not exactly sure why even, but it's just like, yeah, with different stats, you might not even like come across some of the thoughts that you can then choose to internalize or not.
I already hinted at this, but I'm going for Art Cop.
I just got Art Cop, so I know there's like I just got offered one because I'm a drunkard now too. That I looked at the stats and like it raised like all my stats in Psyche by one. I'm like, all right. So it's interesting the way that some of those cabinets of thoughts like are much more powerful than others, but like you don't know. You don't even know what the end result's going to be when you first take on
Nope.
that thought.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's actually like an overall negative. And maybe one very small criticism I have of this game is that I think some of the menus are confusing. And like I'm like, oh, it took me a long time to realize that like I had to use a level up to expand that, like how many thoughts I could take on
The
at
space.
once.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of frustrated me a little bit because I want to kind of mix and match and experiment a little bit more, but I can't because
Mm.
I'm like I need all my skill points.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it costs you to get more space, and it costs you to forget if
Right.
there's one that you end up not liking.
Yeah, I think if there's one consequence of the developers of this game kind of being a little bit kind of outsiders to the industry, is that there's really like no tutorialization or very little in the game, and the game kind of just expects you to figure things out without a lot of direction, and like that's one of its strengths, but I think it definitely could have used a little more explanation, because there's a lot of mechanics that just like if you don't poke around in the menus or experiment with the
Mhm.
items and interact with them and things, you would miss.
Tutorial.
And
Why are you telling me that I can pass time on a bench, but you're not explaining how to organize my own thoughts?
I mean, I think that in some ways you could argue that's part of the role playing experience, right?
Yeah.
Like you know how to sit down on a bench, but you don't know how to organize your thoughts. That sounds like my Harry, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many different individual moments too. Like we haven't talked too much; it's kind of been implied here, but this game is also like probably the funniest video game I have ever played. I laugh aloud at least once every 5 minutes because
Yeah,
of
it's
something
very funny.
ridiculous that I've chosen or something that I see, or just
Right.
like the intensity of all the dialogue options, like that that racist guy who I roundhouse kicked. I'm like, everything he says is so ridiculous that it's actually funny. And yeah, I just think that it's such a weird and awesome blend of the absurd with the serious, and I love that you can just tell that like the developers were just like, you know what, I'm just gonna make the game that I want to make, and I'm not gonna and getting back to that idea of tutorials, like they're not gonna hold hands, and they're not gonna hold hands on the ideas or the lore or
Yeah.
any of that.
Yeah.
And it makes it, I think Roger Ebert once said that, like, if you want to make something of universal experience people are going to enjoy, make it specific. And this game is so specific. And I think that it is a real strength of it, even though there are things about it that frustrate me. Like I'm playing with a controller. I don't love the way you get around with the controller. Like there are times, like even like
I
walking
can
into
imagine that's good.
into the union boss's office, like
Oh,
there's
dear.
like stairs you could walk up. I'm like, I don't even see those
Oh yeah,
stairs.
that's visually not very clear
Yeah.
without like just like kind of the simple mouse click that'll
Yeah.
auto walk
Yeah.
you.
But that's also part of what they're trying to, like, getting to that idea of discovery. Like there's some kid who's smoking a cigarette like on top of a building outside of where the body was hung, and I didn't even see him until like the end of the second day. So it allows me to feel like I'm constantly discovering things, but I will admit that like the look of this game, as striking as it is, and I think it looks incredible. There's no game I've ever played that looks anything like it. Sometimes frustrates me, just sort of from like a how do I get to interact with it sort of perspective.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
it's
but to be fair, Zach, you didn't know that you could highlight the.
Well, I
the
can't
world
because
or-
I'm playing on a controller.
There's got to be a button that'll give you the highlight. I can't imagine they would just
highlight
deprive
the
you of
clickable
that.
things.
Yeah.
I mean, I can scroll. I can obviously like scroll through them. I use like the right stick to do it, but you could tell that
Yeah.
it's definitely a game that's meant to be played
Right.
with mouse and keyboard.
Yeah,
for
it's
sure.
played
Yeah,
almost
for sure.
it's played like entirely with the mouse on
No,
PC.
I know
so-
where you're coming from because I mean, I'm using that highlight option. I almost consider it essential just so I know what's there to interact with. Just because of it's very pretty, but just because of it looks like a real kind of slightly decrepit, cluttered city.
Yeah, I would have missed so much loose change lying on the ground without the highlighting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no like Batman vision going on in this game. Every anything that's interactable, it just like blends right into the background. So yeah.
No, and I think that it's cool, and it definitely like again immerses you in the role playing experience. And maybe I'm just like spoiled as a person who just got done playing like a AAA RPG, where like they made sure I could see everything and they were catering to my needs at every moment. And this game isn't, and I think it's cool. But I will admit that every once in a while, like I turn the game on, I'm like, all right, I really need to focus so I can see everything.
Yeah, it's definitely a game that demands a lot of your attention, and a lot you really have to focus on the text and the environment, and I think that is one of its strengths, and I think most people will be so enraptured by it that it won't be a problem. But you don't want to listen to a podcast or do anything else while playing the game for
Right.
sure.
Yeah, when I played this game, at the same time I was playing like a couple other games I usually do, I wouldn't sit down and play this game when I wanted to play a video game. I sat down and play this game when I was like in the mood to like read a book.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
And
The
like
writing in the game is super novelistic too, I think. So yeah, it gives you the same feeling as when you read in a book when you
100%.
play the game.
So, I guess before we, because I know we've barely touched on everything we could here, but I don't want to go into every single incident here. But I do, before we go, want to talk about at least like one dialogue interaction or one conversation you had during the first 2 days in this game that you thought was amazing that we haven't talked about yet. So whoever wants to give it a shot first, go ahead.
Oh, I've got one. So, when you first meet with Kim, and then he will tell you that he has tools in his car, and you can go out to his car, and then if you've told him that you don't remember who you are, you don't remember what's going on, so he's like, well, you can use my radio to call the station.
It's so
And
good.
so when you call the station, you get the operator, they patch you through, and then of course the station is full with all of your coworkers. And so at this point, we determine, okay, Harry is kind of a up. Yeah, Harry, he's not very good at his job. He has a reputation. So all of the officers at your precinct are then chiming in and making fun of you, and they're like, oh, ask him if he still has his gun. And then the guy will ask you, do you still have your gun? And you're like, wait, do I still have my gun? And it's just so funny, just them making fun of you, and it's clear that like this is not the first time you've gone into a place and then found yourself way in over your head.
Right. They're
you know.
sarcastically calling you Dick Mullen, which is the name of like some pulp detective in the Disco Elysium
Like
world.
Dick Tracy or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just so funny. It's just such a good window into like the culture of his precinct and his reputation with his coworkers. It's hilarious. Yeah.
I also died there because I started asking if they could give me information about my real name, and like they're like, and I think it's your Inland Empire is like, wait a second, don't do this. You're gonna really embarrass yourself. And I'm like, no, I'm going for it. And like my morale was very low because I just started. Like my volition was maybe at 1,
Right.
and so I died very quickly there. You also gonna like make a phone call to a woman who I don't know very well yet, Sylvie.
Yep.
Who you clearly have been very rude to previously.
Yeah, she was the woman who attended bar at the
Yes.
hostel and cafeteria where you're staying. So she witnessed your entire like 3-day rager.
You waved
Yeah.
your gun at her. It was bad.
Yeah, you did all kinds
Oh
of crazy
yeah.
stuff.
Oh, and
Yeah.
there's oh my god, you go around talking to people and people start bringing up you like putting your gun in your mouth and saying you're gonna kill yourself all the time.
Turns
like,
out you actually can do
Yeah.
that in a certain interaction in this game too, which I did as well. Unfortunately, I've died so many times.
Yeah, I think this time around, one of my favorite interactions that I can think of is just like it was a very quaint one, but it was a very good time. It was shortly after I got my first hit of that anti-radiation stuff and had that little nice little interaction with Kim. But just kind of south of there, there's the water lock, which is locked up during the first 2 days. And there's just a guy standing there, and his friend is on the other side, and they're just kind of like waiting for the water lock to come down so that they can reunite with each other. But he's got like some salami, and it's apparently like his friends from the other side salami, and you can decide to ask for some salami. And it says like the friend on the other side like looks very upset about this whole situation, and you end up getting some salami, and then you can also uh, suggest that Kim has some salami, and then you just kind of have like this little moment where you and Kim and then this other guy are just sitting there eating salami together,
Yeah.
and that was just like that's like the kind of interaction only this game will have. That just
Uh-huh.
was like it wasn't like a particularly like a meaningful moment, but it was just like added a lot of flavor, like the most flavor to the experience that
Mhm.
is just part
Literally.
of what makes this game so special.
It's funny because I did that as well, and I was surprised Kim took the salami because usually he's
Exactly,
just
me
like,
too.
"No,
Me
I'm not
too.
doing anything that you want me to do." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks for taking my salami, Kim."
Yeah, you just
Yeah,
why not?
yeah. And so like it gets to that. This game surprises me constantly, and
Mhm.
even in like a small moment like that, the game surprised me.
Uh, I can sort of build off of that because I had a really, really touching moment with Kim. After I had just actually wait, is that the third day? I had just opened the water lock.
Go ahead, it's fine.
Okay. So this is like probably very beginning of the third day. So jumping a little ahead, but not very much. So as soon as you cross, you see what you very quickly determine is a half submerged police vehicle uh on the other side of the water lock. And you can choose to wait um so that you can get information and you know basically from the player's perspective confirm that it's yours, that you crashed and don't remember. um But there's this very sweet interaction where you're waiting and you can pass a check to whistle a tune. And it, oh geez, I forget what stat it is, but it's one I wasn't particularly good at. But I passed the check, and then, Harry was just kind of whistling, passing the time, and Kim joined in, and it was just very sweet.
Hmm.
And so you were just like whistling together. And then a few minutes later, after confirming, like, yep, this is Harry's car, found my badge, you go through a bunch of dialogue options, kind of processing the situation with Kim and saying, like, I don't think I'm going to come back from this. Like, this is, months and months worth of money for the precinct. And one of the things that Kim actually potentially says to cheer you up is that you can still whistle. And it was just so wholesome.
Yeah,
Aw.
I didn't get that tree, and I like that a lot. It's beautiful. Yeah,
Maybe it's time to sober up, Zach.
yeah, I know. No, I don't think I'm
Yeah.
gonna do that.
I am definitely leaning into the like reforming Harry.
Mhm.
I'm trying to stay on the straight and narrow.
I think it's fair.
Just to
Yeah.
give like a fun little anecdote that wasn't my gameplay experience, but was of a friend of mine. Um, he took the role playing in this game very seriously, and he started off as kind of like a degenerate version of Harry, and doing all the drugs, doing all the drinking. And as he was doing that, he's kind of like method acting. He was doing it in real life as well. Every time he uh, took a drink as Harry, he'd take a
Oh
drink
no.
himself.
Oh my
Every
goodness.
time Harry took a hit of some drug, he would take a hit of some drug. And he ended up just like kind of rolling with that, and that all kind of like fueled the different decisions he made. And then at one point in the game, you do get a thought come in, like one of the thought cabinet kind of insertions that proposes that you sober up, and he ended up taking it, and then he also ended up not doing any more, just stayed sober for the rest of his playthrough. And he just described that as like a very kind of profound role-playing experience with this game that I think is just a great way to sum up what makes this game so special, the different ways that players will make their own kind of journey out of it. And maybe not to that level, but that's just kind of the most extreme example. But
That is a wild story.
Yeah.
But also like a touching story, really. Yeah, I mean, I've never done that before. But yeah, that's amazing. That's really cool.
mm,
Man, I'm going to try to talk about my moment, but it's not even going to touch what you just said. That's really cool. I was going to choose the phone conversation. Honestly, one of the things that I think we haven't really touched on too much is like sort of this weirdness of like the supernatural that is sort
Yes.
of like
Yeah.
running through this game.
The pale.
The
Yeah,
pale,
the pale,
Mm.
which I've learned a little bit about, but
It's like their version of climate change, basically.
oh, I didn't
Yeah.
even know that or think about that.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I outside of one of those apartment buildings, you can make a phone call up to and like all of them are out, and the only like way that you can get connected is to like this old recording of this woman who's like sort of haunted by something that has happened, or like there's a man who she like wants to get out of her life. You guys familiar with what I'm talking about here?
Yep.
And it I guess for me, like it struck me in the different sort of things this game is doing and like the level of absurdity it's going to, but also like it genuinely creeped me out.
Mhm.
And like even the second time through, because you can listen to it again and sort of figure out what's really going on with it.
You have to pass a volition check to be able to do that, though.
Yeah.
You have to
Yeah, which
steel
I did, I
yourself.
guess. And it really genuinely creeped me out. And I think got to this notion of the different modes this game can work in, which is maybe the thing that surprised me most in my playthrough. Like I sort of knew that it was going to be like a pro worker sort of game. I was aware of that, but it's the variety of tones and styles and the different sorts of ways it presents itself and the ways you can interact with it that have struck me, and made me realize that maybe this game is not overhyped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes to some really dark places too. With it's realistic. I think
Mhm.
that's as fantastical and absurd as a game could be. Sometimes it's also very realistic, and the game's not afraid to shy away from real problems or
Yeah.
real instances. There was one, you can find more out about the person who's been murdered, and I don't want to get too much into that, but there's one particular story that you can learn about his backstory and the backstory of the group that he's working with that's very chilling and dark and horrible, and most something that most games don't really go into or deal with, and it's able to really handle that kind of sensitive subject matter very well, in a way that I think is pretty impressive, um, compared to a lot of games that kind of use that stuff for shock value.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds me like when you dig in the trash and you find your old notes and you start reading through some notes, of what has happened in your past, and you literally pass out. And it's not obviously getting to that dark of a place, but like the notion that like clearly Harry is disturbed deeply by something, and it gets to like that idea of like a PTSD reaction to it or whatever
Mhm.
it is that he's dealing with, which I don't know yet because I haven't gotten far enough. I've gotten this notion that some woman left him, but I thought that moment was really striking too because I had no idea what was happening. In the same way that he wouldn't know what was happening, and you wake up in Kim's car. I thought that was very cool too.
Yeah, and on that note, the game kind of like leans into that kind of supernatural aspect a lot with every time you go to sleep basically, and you end
Hmm.
up having a
Mhm.
dream as Harry that I mean the first night it's I'm not sure if you actually have to have done the full study of the body, but after you have successfully done that, at least, you end up having a dream where you're kind of just like outside of the motel, and like everything's kind of like weirdly distorted, and you walk up to where the body is, and ends up being Harry himself that's
Mhm.
like hanging, and you end up having
Mhm.
this like kind of like dark, cryptic interaction between Harry and like this version of himself that's like hanging from the tree. And it, yeah, I mean, like we can get a lot more into the specifics of this character's story, but yeah, I love all the ways that the game kind of gets deep into like its supernatural themes during those dream sequences.
Yeah, I'm just continually impressed and surprised at just the range of like moods and reactions it's able to evoke for me. Like I don't think I've simultaneously laughed, gasped, and groaned at a single game like all at once before. Like I don't know. It's impressive. I'm
Yeah,
very invested.
and the fact that the narrator is able to convey all of those different feelings so well by using the exact same dry delivery,
Right?
regardless of what's written,
Remarkable.
is just
However much
incredible.
he got paid, it's not enough.
Yeah, honestly, I think it's the best voice acting performance in a video game ever. The narrator, I think it's just incredible.
Yeah, it's very good.
Well, I am looking forward to finding out more about the specifics of what happened to Harry and what happened in this town, and really digging into the politics of this game in the next one, because I know that a lot of us here are interested in talking about that. But I want to know more before I really dig in, because I can't really come to an informed opinion yet. I like, as Ben was saying earlier, this idea that people can latch on, like people of various ideologies can latch onto things here. And I think that's the strength of the game too, especially given that I think it really does have a specific bent to it. Speaking of that, let's talk about what's coming up next. So next, in 2 weeks, you will hear another podcast about the second half of Disco Elysium, which, like I said, I'm very excited to talk about. And then after that will be the end of my time as sort of the caretaker of Retro Encounter. And Mike Solosi, around the beginning of September, is going to be returning to be the host. He's planning to go back to a weekly schedule, kind of back to retro as normal. I know he has some ideas about what he's going to do. I think the first one when he comes back is going to be about edutainment games, which is like educational games,
Fun.
which I really hated as a kid, but I'm excited to listen to it. Maybe they'll change my mind on that. But then after that, we have some other ideas. I think there's going to be maybe a 16 spoiler cast and some other things related to that. If you want to get in touch with us, give us ideas about things that we can do going forward, you can email us retro@rpgfan.com. You can also follow RPG Fan on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. We're also, I think we have a Threads account, wherever, once Twitter finally fully and completely implodes, we've created accounts in other places, so don't worry, you'll still be able to find us. We also have a Discord, a YouTube, and we also have a Twitch stream almost every day. There's also an RPG Fan shop. I actually think at the time of recording this, there might be a sale. I don't know. But you can find a link to the shop online if you wanted to support us, rep us with some RPG Fan merch. I've got mugs, I've got t-shirts. You should get some. We also have 2 other fine podcasts. Random Encounter, usually hosted by John O'Logan, and usually about current events, and most recently published things on the site. We also have Rhythm Encounter, which is about RPG fan music, usually hosted by Mike Salvato, but often hosted also by Hilary. You can also review us or any other of our podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, whatever. We love feedback, especially the 5-star variety. But before we sign off, I want to make sure people know how to get in touch with each of us. And I actually don't think that a lot of us have much of a social media presence, which means we're the smart ones. But Hilary, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
I would say the best way to get in touch with me is email, and that's hilary@rpgfan.com.
Awesome. And Aleks?
You can email me at alexfraniczek@gmail.com.
And Ben?
Yeah, you can email me at benloganlove@gmail.com.
Perfect. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can also email me, zachw@rpgfan.com, or you can also find me on our Discord as ZachW. And thanks so much for recording this with me, comrades. I had a blast. I'm really looking forward to seeing where this game goes, especially given that a lot of you have talked about how excellent the ending is. And I said my partner is one of her favorite games of all time, and I really have enjoyed playing it, and also playing it to annoy her, which is very fun. So thank you also, listeners. Good night and good luck.